About our current financial system. Hello, everyone. How are you? I am Chan Labuzone. I am the Chief Astronaut Officer for New Foundation and the Managing Director for New Moon. And I work very closely with the NEWFORUM team. And I'm super excited to have Jill, Olga, and Raul here to discuss where are the next billion users that are going to enter into Web3. I would like to ask everyone to introduce themselves. Jill, Olga, and Raul, if you could do it that way, that'd be great.
Great, thanks. And it's such a pleasure to be here. So thanks, Chan, for having me. My background is a little bit unique in terms of how I entered into this space. I started my career actually on Capitol Hill on the policy side and went over to the World Bank. And the last time I was there, I was at their innovation practice group. And in many ways, I think that is kind of that moment. You know, I was there having read the Bitcoin white paper, and I was there as part of something called the Development Marketplace and their open data initiative. And it was a really profound moment for me. Fast forward, became a 3-time entrepreneur. And the last iteration, I had co-founded Jewel, which was the first digital asset bank to receive a banking license in Bermuda, and have since left Jewel, acted as an advisor, investor to several companies, layer 1 platforms, applications, NFT applications, and otherwise, and joined my other partner at Full Stack Ventures, and we're an open metaverse Web3 early stage venture fund.
Nice. Olga?
Hi, Chen. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here as well. My journey is a little bit, kind of like Joe's, a little bit, it goes in many directions before it finds its place. But I'm actually an architect. So I studied architecture, and I'm trained as an urban planner. And, throughout my career, I just specialize actually in land policy. So that has a little bit of some ingredients of economic analysis, and ended up working for some supranational organizations like UN agencies, etc. And I came into contact with the Bitcoin paper actually through a job that I had a policy paper that I had to write for the World Bank. And that was in 2016. And then, you kind of fall down the proverbial rabbit hole. And eventually I found my way into a position where I do knowledge management for a venture fund of funds that only invests in blockchain. So that's what I do now. I switched over around 2020, end of 2020. And I'm really loving every day of it. It's a joyride.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. Very nice. Thank you. Raul?
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me, Chan. So my background comes more from the creative and strategic point of view. I've been working in big advertising agencies for big brands like Gucci, Prada, New York Fashion Week, etc. And my background has always been between 3 sort of luxury areas, between gaming, fashion, and automotive. So I've been always switching between the 3 of them. And I got into Web3 through especially digital fashion and digital identity. That was what started to, click on my head. And that's why we started moving into Evolve, which is the company that we founded in 2021. To elevate the standards of high-end digital fashion. And this is where we are today.
Very nice. Well, a lot of you have referred already to Web3. So let's kind of define what Web 1, Web 2 is. Web 1 was like the big library, right? All this information being pushed to us. It was really exciting. And Web 2 was really like the playground, right? We had games, apps, social networks. So it was like the social web. And now we have what we term all 4 of us have talked about as Web3. How would each of you define what Web3 means to you, and how you obviously described your journey? What is Web3 to you? Raul, would you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, Web3 is basically the new era of the internet that everyone kind of describes it. But I see, a whole new level of, economies, gamificate experience, immersive experience, a new way of, selling and buying and e-commerce, understanding the data that goes across all the different supply chains. And I think there is so much more than just what people describe as, the internet, this is just the top of the iceberg of what is coming after.
Yeah, exactly. And Jill, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Web3 for me is just new really new ownership models, new architecture, new primitives, fungible, non-fungible tokens, crypto. But really what unlocks that is how we define ownership, how we define business models that can be built on top. I think just to Raul's point, there's a fantasy and a hope and an aspiration that this really transforms the way people engage with their own data and how they own, operate, create, co-collaborate based on this new model of being and established by new sort of primitives in that realm.
And Olga, what are your thoughts about Web3?
Well, I think that I completely agreeing with Jill. I think the key word is ownership. It's there's a new asset class, there's a new way of distributing and trading ownership of digital assets. So it is this new layer on top of the internet that is allowing us to create new structures by which people can collaborate and can align incentives. So this idea that, for the first time, you can actually have a system by which through this distribution of ownership of value, basically the interest of the individual can be completely aligned with the interest of the group. And that's very, very powerful for any kind of collaboration. And the internet is that, no? It's this great collaboration experiment.
Yeah, I agree. The Web3 is definitely about our new digital lives. And ironically, it's funny that fashion has never really been part of Web 1, Web 2 at the beginning, but it really took Web3 by storm. It was niche, and now I think it really is here to stay. According NFTtech.com, 320 brands launched a total of 526 projects in 2022 and part of Q1. I'd be curious to all of you, what are your thoughts on this? Who are the players? Where are they? What are they doing? And how do they do this? And how does this digital identity tie in to the brands, and why would they care? I don't know who wants to start. Raul, would you want to start? And I'm sure all of you, I know.
Yeah, so, yeah, for sure. I think for me, one of my inspirations to jump into the digital fashion realm was with Alexander McQueen in 2018. I remember, I think, when they started introducing MCQ with, really introducing blockchain and creating a sub-brand under Alexander McQueen that was, purely backed by blockchain, right? And for me, that was very interesting, especially now going back and looking at, what they did at that time in comparison to what the new brands are doing and blockchain. I see a lot of similarities, and you can see how they were so advanced at that time. I see a lot of brands, always jumping into the space, trying to, just be part of the technology and be there. I've seen a lot of brands failing, probably more brands failing than succeeding. But the ones that are succeeding, I think they're doing a great job, and they are focusing more on the loyalty, the community, and growing that audience that they currently have, and transforming it, but also bringing other Web3 people to that community, right? And I think that is the way that fashion brands will grow. That's the way that the co-creation and the community feeling will start flourishing, right, on all of this.
Agreed. So, and Jill and Olga, I mean, obviously you are working in very similar fields. You see a lot of projects coming your way. You talk to the brands, and what are your thoughts on this question? Who are they? Why are they here? And do you think they're staying? And how does digital identity tie into all of this?
With real reference over to the research that we've pulled from, you're looking at just a broad brush categorically of heritage brands, fast fashion, retail that are really kind of going either from how do we experiment to how do we create something that feels native and quite organic to our brand. And so you see things like, and forgive me for taking a long route to get there, but LVMH, again, last year, 2022 was, they launched 17 Web3 projects across 9 subsidiary companies. It's an interesting number, and not all of those projects were native to those subsidiary companies, right? And so let me just say the things that I'm seeing from a brand perspective and then from a product perspective. From a brand perspective, it's the ones that are successful are truly paying attention to their local communities, truly understanding localization. So, we can point to Nike, we can point to a few sort of like critical relationships at the like core local levels that feel like these are our consumers, these are end users, these are our buyers, these are our fan loyalists, and they're very, very specific to how they want to be engaged with. And the ones that are most successful in launching these proofs of concept or experiments are the ones that are like any sort of marketing jargon and language, are paying attention to how their hyper-localized communities are wanting to be engaged with. I am certainly seeing on the sort of platform side, obviously everything from abstractions on digital identity to sort of new and innovative, call them CRM systems, right? And how you're sort of communicating directly. And there are going to be some winners and there's going to be some losers. And that's what we're sort of paying attention to, which is how those brands who are not native to Web3 are leveraging those platforms or, that ability to connect directly and, launch several proofs of concept that they can test and trial and experiment with. I'll hand it over to you, Olga.
Sure. I'd like to continue with this theme of aligning incentives. So, because I think that what is really great about this technology is that everybody wins. There's a great outcome for everyone. So if you look at tokenized ownership, first of all, this means that for the first time, it's token holders are like shareholders. So they share into your brand. I mean, they share into the value of the brand. So there's a new way of kind of decentralizing and distributing ownership and your brand as such. So they also have a voice, and this voice matters because they vote with their tokens. So I think it's definitely a winning proposition for users, for fans, for consumers. And it's just a fantastic new technology for brands as well, and for any kind of retail or someone who's putting forward content, IP, because you come with this. There's a new way of really understanding loyalty. We in marketing terms, commerce, we talk about a lot about push and pull, and with these NFTs, you basically you end up getting what I would like to think of as almost spontaneous ambassadors, who, think about the community, the Bored Ape community, for example. And we saw that all, throughout last year. You have massive participants, holders in the brand who had, some of them more than 100 million audiences, within their networks, their social media collectively, and who were actually paying to then promote the brand of Bored Ape. They would pay $500,000, to just own one of these items and to kind of express their alignment with that brand to their audience. So this is very, very powerful for brands. Yeah, I think it's a winning proposition for everybody. And token gated commerce also maybe another interesting aspect, which allows to naturally segment audiences and then provide them with unique experiences based on their previous choices and preferences. But this is far better than cookies, right? Than what we had in Web2. So from a tech usability standpoint, I think it's everybody wins.
Raul, I saw you nodding a few times. There's something you want to elucidate from what Olga said?
Yeah, I agree in basically everything that I was saying, and Jill as well. I think there is a factor here where the current audiences for fashion brands or any sort of brand has always been almost like the consumer has been dragged into if you like the brand, you buy, or you don't buy the brand. But what Web3 is allowing the consumer to do now is to join the brand, which is a more close look into the relationship that they have with the brand, right? There's a conversation that is happening between the consumer and the brand. And I think that point and that intersection between the consumer and the brand is what is going to help fashion brands move forward. If they're able to really listen to their audience and understand what they want, we are talking about, the future of style hunters that, we had since, the 80s and the 90s. Now we are moving into the next generation of what is my audience? What can I provide to them? And I think that is, something that is going to be very difficult to understand, especially for very traditional fashion brands or any sort of brand. But I think we are getting there. And, methods like any sort of DAO and stuff like that, it will really accelerate that process.
And it's funny that you brought up the Bored Apes thing. And to Jill, I would be curious because it seems on the regulation side that crypto's getting like slaughtered in every country, but NFTs, no one knows what to do with. I mean, you have any thoughts on that?
When you're looking at a non-fungible token, you really have the ability to have this almost dynamic marketing degree of engagement. And I think Olga has covered, some of the major use cases. You've got token gating, and you've got the ability to create tokenized membership and tokenized, ticketing. And to the extent that NFTs have created a great deal of kind of next generation adoption within, let's say we say the sort of Web3 adoption, it's largely because it is sort of native to that engagement, right? And then there's multiple use cases that are very clearly evident. And as you're looking at the US right now, and you're looking at other jurisdictions that are making it extremely difficult to operate, very difficult to have banking rails, and are extremely focused on what is and what is not a security, with, a great deal more overreach. And it's easier, it's scary for brands to try and enter into a world that is, let's say, has a great deal of regulatory uncertainty, whereas NFTs kind of provide a primitive, to some extent, that is, it creates enablers around marketing and engagement and use cases that are, beyond very basic and obvious use cases. And Olga, I don't know if you have anything else to say about that. I mean, because that's...
Yeah, I think, you're right. The regulatory path is still uncertain, and especially in various geographies, especially in the US. But I think there's a certain inevitability about this technology. And I think we're going to move away from thinking of crypto as this speculative, issuance machine, and to think of crypto technology and cryptographic tokens as a kind of underlayer of NFTs and all that comes with Web3. And the closer we get to having both regulators and policymakers understand this technology, and then the closer we get to having a better user experience and being able to abstract that technology so that users are not overwhelmed and feel like they're just walking on eggshells. I think the further will come. No, I mean, if we had to rely, when mobile internet was exploding, let's say starting, after the iPhone, we're talking about 2007, 10, 12, when this mobile internet revolution came about, if everybody who had to use mobile internet had to really understand what TCP/IP was, then really, this would have never happened. So we just have to get to that moment where the technology is just that, a technology, and not actually a casino.
What do you guys see for the trajectory, like for the next decade, like when it comes like fashion? They're obviously taking it, they're running with it. Usually it's gaming and the other industry, which we won't need to name, that has been there. But fashion obviously has made a big imprint. And so where do you guys see? I mean, you both have policy backgrounds, and you both alluded to that needs to come in sync. So I'd be curious. And Raul, you're here in the space and you're doing very well, which is not common. So I'd be curious to have your feedback on this. Maybe Raul starts and we let our policy folks come next.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, and I think this links to the current conversation that we are having about how does the technology facilitate, the day-to-day life of people. And until that moment happens, when people start using technology, even without us noticing it, that is when we are going to be, seeing the mass adoption. And, it might take, 1 year, 2, 3, 4, we don't know yet. But what is certain is that the gaming industry is one of the leaders in this space. And we are going to see a lot of brands and a lot of different solutions happening under the gamified experiences, for sure. And fashion brands are just, they have a very good chance to enter these gamified experiences, because it relates to the identity of the players, of the users, right? So if I am in, a game like Fortnite, or I am, in any sort of experience, I want to use, I don't know, my Gucci jacket, for example, right? And I want to be using certain clothing that is going to be a little bit more special. So I think when it comes to digital fashion, for me, it was never, a question. Digital fashion was there since day one. Like, it was a very clear transition. So for me now, what is going to be interesting is to see how we almost bring the quality up and the levels up. Like I feel now we are in that moment where, okay, we have seen Roblox, we have seen the Sandbox, we have seen this, we have seen brands just forgetting about all the legacy they had, just to be in like an experience and just to be part of, a cultural event rather than focusing on what fashion really is and the fabrics and the garments and the stitching and, the different trends. I feel now fashion needs to start coming back to their heritage and to leverage, the skill sets and the knowledge they have in fashion to really push it further, right? We can see now, like tools, for example, like Unreal Engine 5 is really helping us a lot. There is still a lot of development that has to happen to get to that very fine detail. Even for us at Evolve, we really had to create even, plugins and really play with the code around Unreal Engine 5 as well to push that a little bit, and to give it a booster to get to the quality that we wanted. But things like this, they don't take, 1 month or 2 months. We have been working on this project for almost a year and a half already. And that's probably one of the reasons we are getting into, this healthy and bright path moving forward. But, there's also the other downside, which is we didn't launch a year ago where everyone was like booming and putting all the projects out there. So we didn't get the traction that other brands, other digital fashion houses had and still has today, right? So that's kind of the two steps to this scale, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that like the quality of the fashion and the quality of the games are quite lo-fi. It's a nice way to put it. And we're not there, but you building on UE5 is definitely a right step in the direction. Olga, what are your thoughts? I mean, you obviously know Raul very well. I know you don't invest in something you don't believe in, so I'd be very curious to see what your thoughts on what he has said. And
I think we really cannot talk about fashion without mentioning, there's a couple of elephants in the room, but I'll start with one, which is the metaverse. And there's great, or maybe not so great press in the last months period, which is the metaverse is dead and Meta killed it, and Disney laid off so many people, and yet I really have to go to a tweet by Tim Sweeney, by the CEO of Epic Games. I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago, right? He wrote. Rip the metaverse, and he was quoting from an article from a journalist and saying, well, yeah, let's organize a wake where the 600 million users of Fortnite, books, et cetera, he listed all, the various both owned and open and centralized and more decentralized metaverse platforms that exist today. And his point being, there's 600 million users active monthly on all of these platforms. So the metaverse is not going anywhere. Now, the minute we have that and we just, it continues to develop and it continues to grow into itself. I mean, maybe it's a bit of an adolescent right now. Maybe it's just a baby and, we don't know what shape it takes yet. Digital fashion is just going to play a key role. I think the only question in my mind, it's really when it comes to the tipping point, where we're going to see those 600 million users is kind of roll into 1 billion, and then all of them, let's say, cryptographically enabled, so able to share and trade this NFT, like NFT or any form of cryptographic asset. I think the only question is it going to be like brands that are going to achieve that through engagement, or is it going to be games, or is it going to be branded gaming experiences? I think really it's between brands and games, in my view, who is going to really tip this whole thing over. And probably a close second is going to be ticketing and the crossover. Probably sports events are also going to play a key role in the next few years. But I wouldn't even say 10 years ahead. I think 5 years ahead. We'll see sufficient development on this front.
100% saw that tweet and it's like, thank God, because it's difficult to have an open metaverse fund and just be constantly saying it's not dead. You do not understand what is happening underneath the ocean. And so to the extent that I'd say a few different things. One, I agree with Raul. So we're looking at a 5-year time frame. We're going to see a lot more higher fidelity utility around fashion. That's going to be an important piece. When we're looking at let's say, how are we going to trigger and onboard those 1 billion users? We look at that intersection of community, content, and commerce that comes from ostensibly big brands, large brands, as we're seeing, that are starting to make a ton of experiments that work and don't work. And to the extent that they work, where it becomes really easy for an individual to say, okay, I am purchasing a ticket. It doesn't matter how I'm purchasing a ticket. You just know at the alternative layer that that ticket has multiple use cases for me, and how I'm holding it and how I'm carrying it and how I'm storing it is somewhat abstracted. But when you're looking at fashion specifically, I believe we're going to have multiple identities online, digitally, and they're broadly and in many ways going to be defined by our fashion. Really how we're defining ourselves in real life is going to take multiple forms online. We see it all the time. I mean, I frequently love to go back and have conversations with Phil Rosedale, who built Second Life. And, to the extent that he can talk about these avatars, these digital avatars and the way that they operate. And I think we forget how much transaction volume still happens in Second Life. We all forget, right? There's still 90 million transactions a year that are happening in Second Life with 1 million users. But my point is, there are going to be sort of 5 things around fashion that I think are going to be interesting. The fidelity is going to just change. The second, fashion brands are going to create a lot more co-creation and collaboration. The third, our identities are going to be expressed, in multiple ways, digitally, online, and that's going to be determined in many ways by what we're wearing and how we're engaging with either those skins or those activations in digital realm, online and offline. And I think we're going to see a lot more brands and fashion brands that are working very closely with their community. So you're going to have a lot more co-created items and IP that is fundamentally owned by the creator to some extent. We're just almost skimming the surface of how those brands start to work and activate those communities both online. I mean, these are really interesting experiments. And I think we're just scratching the surface of what that looks like.
That's the second time I've heard someone say that. Raul said they were at the tip of the iceberg. Yes.
Yeah. You know what I'd like to think? I think I'm quoting Andrew Steinwald here, but I think this is a great way of kind of bringing it home. I mean, I think that NFTs, they are the new Rolex.
Yeah. How people look at you, your wallet, what you have in there, and they'll understand the kind of person you are. I agree. Definitely. I think we were talking about the next billion, right? So we're talking about drivers of adoption. I mean, Olga, you touched upon sports, and do you want to dive in that a little bit more?
Well, what we're seeing in terms of the technology projects that are emerging and categories, and I think, for example, Raul's work is phenomenal. I'd hope that we can see some of what Evolve is producing right now, because trying to sort out what avatars not only are they going to look like, but how they're going to interoperate with the technology and how they are going to be able to transform and evolve. I think that's incredibly exciting. What we're also seeing in like I say, various categories is a lot of activity in what you could consider the kind of the interface between real life events and your digital assets. So, and there's a host of problems that need to be solved along that kind of very specific type of supply chain, which has to do with proofs. Exactly on that point with a startup like Token Proof, who is doing, kind of easing the way in which you can use your digital assets to prove that you fulfill certain requirements when you're, for example, standing in line in the front of, at the entrance of a live event, like a massive sporting event, because you can imagine that there's a lot of friction to having to open your wallet and actually, show somebody or prove to somebody, do people that scan QR codes now have to look at Etherscan transactions or records to verify that, you are the owner of something or that you have fulfilled a certain requirements to be in attendance. You have, things like Token Proof, IYK is also doing great work. Then also crossover with NFC and technology. There's also a company in the US called Verify, which I think is doing great work, which brings together both traceability and proof of ownership and proof of belonging. I mean, of course, you cannot skip, mentioning something like POAP, proof of attendance.
Of course.
So there's all these very interesting, you can run the gamut between the purely digital and also engaging in virtual 3D worlds and avatar technology, all the way down to sensors and actually how do we communicate in real life and how do we let these digital assets express themselves. So very exciting.
It's very exciting. I wanted to go back to Jill. You talked about co-creation, and Raul, obviously this is kind of your bag. What are some of the examples you see in Web3, and how do you get into a collaboration? I'll be curious to hear your journey with that.
Look, I think there are still a lot of different ways that the co-creation can be allowed. And I feel in the past probably 10 years, we have seen, even before this co-creation in Web3 was a thing, we have seen a lot of collaboration, from different creative directors from different brands, from Mercedes, or like doing a collaboration with Virgil Abloh, like looking into fashion and automotive, like very, very strange intersections in there. But I think that sort of philosophy is going to be expanded into pretty much everyone. This is not about the name. This is about the skill sets and the talent. And that's what excites me the most, that it really opens the doors to anyone in the world to be able to contribute and to co-create with fashion brands, right? Like for me, one of the key missions is to be able to find and identify those members in our community that have that skill set and that passion and that drive to really integrate their IP value, their storytelling into new creations, not only for what we are building with Evolve, but also with the partners and all the brands that we are also collaborating with Evolve, right? So if we have a talent in our community that is great with denim, for example, and we have a partnership with Diesel or G-Star, or a brand that's very heavy on denim, we can bring and pull them into that, right? And I think communities are going to be driven more into being part of the team in a way, right? And I think it's a difficult process right now, especially on like how do we differentiate the IP value of who is the owner of this, who is the owner of that. But I think if everything comes from let's do something cool, let's create something interesting, let's really explore the opportunities and the possibilities, I think that's when we can really boost the creativity of everyone. Coming back to the example that I put together of Virgil and Mercedes, like Virgil is amazing, Mercedes is amazing. Just put them together and you create something even more amazing and unique, right? So I think that's definitely where we should be, going in the next generation of, the economy for the new creators.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I want to be curious to know, because Jill, Metaverse, you touched upon it. How many metaverses can we have? And what about that co-creation piece? Like, how do that interoperability, how are you going to answer that piece? Like, how do you jump from one to the other? Can you be in a bunch of them? Will they all work? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
I certainly am not going to speak on behalf of Roblox, on the interoperability side. I do think what you are going to start to see, so there's a company right now that we're looking at, we really absolutely love on the infrastructure side called RP1. And to the extent that what you can start to see to some extent is individuals that can enter directly through the web, right? You're going to have to create that ability. More importantly, you're going to be able and need to support the ability to scale a number of users in their own individual quote unquote metaverses, right? So it's like what you're doing is you're enabling someone to enter in, and there's some degree of interoperability within RP1's ecosystem. And, I'm hoping that this is the next iteration of what's being built. So for instance, they'll enable 100,000 users over a single instance. And that's something that they're going to demonstrate at AWE at the end of the month. And we're excited to see. As it relates to interoperability, this is going to be a difficult one. It's a hard one for me to answer. If we are open metaverse focused, and to the extent that we are hoping that we can start seeing interoperability between, there's a major infrastructure issues and decisions that have to be made at that level that are not ours to make. But I hope that's what is built. I mean, we certainly hope that's what's built in Web2 environments. We saw, these closed gardens, and this is what we're trying to move away from. So, TBD.
Fair. And Olga, any thoughts on that? I mean, because interoperability is like the big thing. A lot of things are siloed. The L1s are siloed. The metaverses are siloed. Like, how would you want to address it? What do you see out there addressing that?
Interoperability is a great technical question, and like most great technical questions that deal with internet technology, they tend to be solved when there's enough of a drive, enough of a price. What I find difficult in order to push that interoperability, or that that intense investing into solving this particular problem, is that right now, with the exception of the key gaming, let's say metaverse platforms that Tim Sweeney was referring to, most of the open metaverses, and you can think of Decentraland or the Sandbox or Voxels, there's just not a lot of content, and there's just not a lot of presence. I mean, there's not the same level of density. So this problem is going to get solved when there is just so much content and so much presence that there is actually an incentive to solve it, and to have all of these these great forces, this kind of crossover. And of course, at that point, the issue is you need for the gatekeepers to be in alignment. So that's where the decentralized aspect of this plays a role. I think we'll just get there. Maybe also another reason why this is maybe not being pushed forward enough is because we're probably missing the iPhone of all of this. We're probably missing that one piece of technology, device, enabler that is just going to flood the gates open. And whether that's an AR glasses set or I don't. We're just going to have to wait and see. But we're probably at the verge of seeing something of that nature kind of pop up, and that will change the landscape.
I'm hoping it's a digital wearable. I would love to address like the elephant in the room, AI. And we talked about co-creation. Like, where does AI fit in all this? It clearly is going to be player. It already is for a lot of this technology. Any thoughts? Maybe Olga, I'd be curious to hear what you say, and then pass to Jill and then Raul.
Sure. Well, yeah. Who can pretend that they haven't heard of AI in the past few months, a few years, for that matter? Yeah, it is here. It is here to stay. It's a very exciting, industry and development and technology, and the fact that it is so broadly also made open source, that adds to it. It seems like the value capture that very, very large players can, the hold that they can have on the technology is definitely mitigated by the openness of the technology. So yeah, super exciting. I know that some people get also anxious about it. I think there's an enormous type of synergy between blockchain and AI. And first of all, if we think of the metaverse, we were just talking about the metaverse. I mean, AI, it's the largest accelerator of this new iteration or this new space in the internet, because it just facilitates content creation. I mean, we were talking before about metaverse platforms and experiences being, if not empty, difficult to fill, not only with users, but with content and meaningful content. Now, AI really solves that problem. So now, of course, that might be seen as a threat from the point of view of the creator community and creators as such. But I think of it more as a technology, as a tool that needs to be harnessed. So from that point of view, yeah, I think of AI as a true and most meaningful accelerator of this metaverse inevitability. And from the point of view of blockchain, I think blockchain is the best guardrails that we could have ever imagined for AI, because we do have the technology to be able to trace provenance and to look at fake content and really assess origin and fidelity and legitimacy. So I think this is really like a marriage made in heaven.
I think, Olga, you're right, because one of the things that we talked about before was really like, where does blockchain fit? Does it go back to just being kind of this provenance, right? The guardrails, right? It's going to be interesting to see as you talk about co-collaboration. Like you gave the example of Alexander McQueen, right? So we're going to start seeing Alexander McQueen's AI, right? And, having trained and learned in all of the designs. And so you now have potential sort of design mechanisms, multiple design mechanisms. And I'm curious to see how Alexander McQueen's AI starts, working with, I don't know, we can think of many other designers or young designers as you're creating kind of a final product or a final piece in the digital realm. And I'm curious how we will figure out IP and ownership, starts to evolve, because I think there's some messy areas that are going to be played out in the courts for some time around, when I think about, and I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but even if you think about Getty Images and the lawsuit that is going on right now and how you're training those models and where that IP lives in the public realm versus not. And so I think it's an accelerant, and I think it's going to be really exciting, but it's quite mind-blowing to think about co-creation between Alexander McQueen's AI and, Jill Richmond's AI, for instance. And so and a digital piece that is created between the two. So not to go too far down a rabbit hole, but there's some question marks rather than answers.
Yeah, a lot of.
But I'm sorry, just, to your point, I mean, I think it's a great time to be doing research in law, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same way that DAOs are just throwing out the window everything we thought about legal entities, and reinventing the corporation, the limited liability corporation, it's forcing us to really think about intellectual property and intellectual properties in completely different ways. And I mean, hopefully this is more productive than limiting. Raul, what do you think, or from point of view of a creative agency and a creative a creator, how excited or how concerned are you about this IP rights issue with AI?
I'm going to answer two questions. One is more on what you just asked, and then I want to also dive into the legal side, because, as a founder, it's very interesting, the process that you go into understanding different tax laws, etc., in different countries. But for me, what is most interesting on AI is, again, and this is the same as co-creation, is how AI can push our boundaries in a personal level to create, to think, to inspire ourselves. And for me, I come back actually to my past. When I was growing up, I wanted to be, a musician. I was doing radio. I was doing producing music. And one of my downfalls was always that it was very hard for me to really define my sound. Right, it was very difficult to define the signature sound that it was gonna make me, the Rolling Stone, that sound that you immediately recognize. That's why I moved to design, because I could identify that a bit easier. And I think AI is gonna help a lot creators to identify, that signature. AI, if we are able to train and customize that tool, we can, drag all our content, all the work that we have done, all our experiences, or, pictures of our holidays, even, really going into the deeper level of yourself. And this is me, this is my AI. My work can be reflected based on those experiences. That is something that really, really excites me. And this is, part of what we are looking into with Evolve. That was always the idea, being able to connect with a technology that can evolve and grow with you. That's how, we see this again, third time that we say today, the type of the iceberg, because there is so much more that's coming on that. And then when it comes to, taxes and the legal aspect of all this is, it's very, very interesting, because again, we don't have any definition yet. It's very, 1 week we might have, a new white paper in the States, and then we have a new law in Dubai, and then another one in Europe. And when we are talking at this scale, and also at the pace that this is growing, it's very hard for a lot of, legal entities to even catch up. This is why we see a lot of, for us, it was very difficult, for example, to even find the right team to work with us to set up, the entities, and to not only just set up the entity for today, but set up an entity in a way that it works, in 10 years time, right? Obviously, we know that it's gonna have to evolve and to be flexible somehow, but there is a huge opportunity for any legal experience person out there to jump into this, and also accountants. I always tell my accountants that, if they really nail it, they have a bright future ahead. And they're really pushing forward for that. So it's very interesting how they even use also AI to grow and to learn and all of this. So yeah, there's a lot of things around the area that are very interesting for new founders.
Sounds like this might be our part 2. Just the AI. Raul, you've obviously are a builder, you're a creator. If you could share what you've done, and it'd be great to see. I know our creators at NewMove would love to see what you're building, and our community at NewForum. Do you have something you could discuss your journey and like share with us what you guys are doing?
Yeah, for sure. I would like to share in particular one of the very first teaser that we put out there. That was in, I think, September, October last year. And that was just the very first tweet sharing our work and with intention to build a community. We started about in 2021 with the intention to challenge the fungibility of NFTs, right? We really wanted to create something that actually can transform, that can evolve, that can grow with you as part of, the life companion kind of. For me, digital fashion was the crucial part to bring everything together. I always say that it was like this teaching that brings everything together in that sense. So we started putting together, a team with, a company in UK, which is, one of the best CGI studios in Europe called Boss Collins. They became partners of us. We immediately had a team of like 20 people and 20 creators working with us. Then we started bringing more of like the communication and the strategy. We started building a team for the 3 main buckets that we need to see for a good project to succeed, which is, the best quality graphics, the best strategy out there, something very innovative, creative, and the best communication and marketing. How do you build communities in Web3? What are the new ways that we can use? And then obviously, how do we bring all of this together with the technology? How do we create the tools? How do we create, that kind of landscape where we are going to start building everything on top, right? So for us, it was the most important part of this process was to find the right team, the right people to build this. Now we are at that point where we focus on creating the community. That's something that we have done already with our socials, with different real life events, with different Twitter spaces, conferences, etc. And the launch of our first NFT drop that was really about, a created community. We didn't even put a price to it. We literally give it for free, but we put out there a form so people could apply to become a member, as any other sort of membership, in Web2, for example. But in this way, we are able to understand who is joining and what are the skill sets. So a lot of the companies before us, what we have seen that they have done is, jumping into things straight away. It could be NFTs, so it could be just a Web3 studio, and could be this or that. But for Above was always about the community. If we are building a Web3 studio, we are building a digital fashion house, we need to lead by example, and we need to create all of these tools and all these things before we start, telling brands and telling others, this is what you should do, right? So right now we are launching a new collection on the 1st of June, and that's going to be the Avatar collection, where we are going to be able to see a set of avatars and a set of different fashion collections and digital wearables that you're going to be able to use in any platform, obviously, because we are building everything in Unreal Engine 5, and we are pushing the capabilities and the quality of Unreal Engine 5 as much as possible. So really trying to get the best of the best in this project.
Oh, that's amazing. How would you say you differentiate from other Web3 projects out there?
I get this question a lot, and I think the main answer here is the team, because I've seen this since day one. The major gap in the current landscape is that there are a lot of companies, a lot of studios that they focus on one thing or another thing. And for me, it's always about the trio, right? That I said before, it's creative, it's strategy and communication and technology. And this is something that we have, and we have the best out of the three, right? So it's very important that you create a team that really understands not only what the possibilities are today, but how we can push it. In all this process, for example, I discussed this with Olga the other day, like when we joined and we started working on this project, we didn't have the tools that we wanted. Like Unreal Engine 5 was still Unreal Engine 4. At that time, we already started working on a plugin and started to work on tools to push the software, right? And to be able to extract the quality as much as possible. So that is something that it has been playing in our favor. We discovered, skill sets within our team that we didn't even know we had. Sometimes there's like, how creators, we are always, searching and learning and discovering new things. And this is why, we are getting the differentiation on the quality as that's pretty much the most obvious differentiator here.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you obviously touched upon like user experience, and to Jill and to Olga, like how can Web3 technology enhance that user journey, that experience, like online, offline? I'm sure both of you have some thoughts on that. Jill, you want to go first, and then Olga?
I'd like to, discussing experience, I'd like to maybe draw a little bit of a landscape, because we've talked before a little bit about startups and what exciting things are happening. And I think that in digital fashion specifically, you have to differentiate between native projects and native initiatives, Web3 natives and non-native. And from that point of view, I mean, each has their advantages, but in terms of how the user interacts with them, well, you could not start looking at this without mentioning Artifact. So Artifact, being kind of like the first proof of concept that it was possible for a creative agency to actually, accrue enormous value in a matter of months and to create a value that was immediately tradable. Yeah. So I think the way that they approach the experience of the users with, they launched, I think, in the order of 14 projects, 14 activations, most of them related to Nike in their first year. And that was just phenomenal. What they were able to achieve, it's definitely a reference. Of course, you have to also mention maybe the Fabricant, who also was one of the very, very first startups that was able to imagine what digital fashion could look like beyond, just, a pair of sneakers, which granted the sneakers are the greatest meme in fashion history. But, there's more to fashion. I'd say maybe Charlie Cohen with Restless is doing great work right now, also trying to bridge that and provide unique experiences. Of course, what Raul is doing and what Evolve is doing, I find it very exciting because it's engaging also this avatar thinking. A project like Cyber Brokers, which is an NFT PFP collection, is actually doing more than many other collections in order to kind of put forth fashion and identity for NFTs. And then moving over to the non-natives, I think the great challenge, but also opportunity for user experience there is that all these brands and media and web media companies actually have enormous intellectual property libraries. So I would say it's content. If you go and ask them why they're entering the Web3 space, they're going to tell you it's, mostly they want to provide great experiences and they want to generate engagement. But right up there also, it's they want to repurpose their IP libraries. So I think from either point of view, there's great incentives, and I think experiences are the abound.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'll say is almost if you're looking at great UI and you can call it creativity, we can talk largely in the area where Olga breaks it down, which is the native and the non-native. So if we're to talk about the non-native, there's a great, I thought NFT Tech, who did a really good report, sort of started to score a lot of those projects based on 4 categories. And it's a great way of looking at it, right? It was the aesthetics, originality, purpose, fluency, how hard is it to understand? What are the clear goals? If you look at some of the projects which were fantastic with the Australian Open, we've talked about this, it's like For instance, like, is this meant to be ephemeral? I thought it was a really fascinating and interesting, series of activations they did in 2022. And then, of course, we can't forget Starbucks. I think Starbucks has done some really, really phenomenal and interesting sort of degrees of engagement, leveraging IP and that content flywheel. I mean, that's the reality. You've got that big, big, big flywheel when you're looking at non-native brands. And that goes full circle into how are we onboarding the next billion users? Well, guess what? It's going to have to come from big, big, big sort of content flywheels, big, users. And again, that is not necessarily native. That's non-native to some extent. And, the last one that I'll sort of reference here is actually, even sort of L'Oreal's DAO Gorgeous, which I think is really, really, really sort of interesting. And it's something that we're sort of interested in paying attention to, outside of some of the projects that are native that we're certainly paying attention to. That's we're looking at how these big brands are going to start leveraging that network. And so I'll leave that there.
Excellent. Before we had chatted about iPhone and we need an iPhone type product to bring this all together. Olga had brought that up, and I think that's a great point. And so I'd be curious, Raul, for you, what are some of the barriers you see based on her comment about, iPhone that's going to be something that's going to make everyone like say, okay, we get it. We need to work together. What are some of the barriers you see in Web3?
It all comes right now from number one is platform capabilities and leading to obviously the graphics that we are able to implement on, different platforms. I even put the sample of my previous launch on, on a platform like OpenSea, right? We are working with 8K, 16K graphics that platform like that cannot take, right? So we had to reduce our graphics to the minimum. And it's just a thing because you lose a lot of the hard work that you put together, everything that you have built, because the platform cannot hold that. So from the design point of view, I think the current limitations is the technology right now. I think there's softwares like Unreal Engine that they're moving very fast and developing new systems. But now I think the next iteration is how do we use it? How do we interconnect and use that technology, and how do we bring them into our phone, into our daily lives? Like when we wake up, we use our phone. That's the first thing. Like to create avatars that are going to be in the metaverse on your desktop, that's great. But how can we connect with that avatar? How they can become more of your day-to-day companion? How can they become of use for you? How can you maximize the interaction with your digital identity? And I think right now the main barrier is number one, the platform capabilities, the interoperability between of them, and the connectivity, especially on the day-to-day lives.
And Olga, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, I have to agree. There's a lot of issues that have to do with usability, and then of course the underlying technology, transactability. So how easy it is for people to move around wallets and all the crypto-enabled factors. And I think at the end of the day, I'd like to think. I mean, I am a designer at heart. I'd like to think it's about design. You mentioned the iPhone. We talked about it. If you go back to Steve Jobs, I mean, the reason why Apple captured the imagination of, globally of a global market was because he was able to introduce true type fonts into the first Apple computers. It was really a design waterfall, what kind of like catapulted and propelled Apple into becoming what is now. So yes, I mean, we do have technological barriers, but I'd like to think that design is one of the greatest challenges ahead. Not only from the point of view that it looks great and that it feels great and that it is a joy, but also from the point of its usability and that it is easy and that it is seamless, that people flow into these experiences without having to think about it twice, really.
Excellent. So on that note, I really like to thank Jill, Olga, and Raul for joining us at NEWFORUM. It's been such a pleasure and a lot of fun. I look forward to our part 2 of this. I'd like to end with a quote from DeGods that he gave at ETH Denver, which Olga and I happily attended together. It was a lot of fun. And he said, thinking more like creators versus startups is how Web3 to survive. And so on that note, have a good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us.